Hi, Bonnie. Good evening. How are you doing?
Hi, good evening. I'm well, and you?
I'm great. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is Bonnie Rouah, a member of the St. John's Wood community. Her and her husband, Benjamin, are pillars of the Saatchi Minyan, of the Saatchi community, and have been davening with us. How many years have you been living in London now?
So it's been 6 years, but kind of 5 years back in this neck of the woods.
Fantastic, fantastic. So first of all, tell me, how are you managing with the little ones during this crazy time? How are you juggling being a mum, work, kids and husbands and all your other commitments? How are you getting on?
Well, I think we've been particularly fortunate. Sometimes you just kind of fall on the lucky side of things. And I think, you know, Benjamin obviously being home, that's helped because often he spends much of his week sort of in Paris or traveling. So that obviously helps. But I think probably our biggest savior has been our au pair, Alice, who very, graciously decided to kind of stay with us through this. So I think that has been a game changer. And I'm very aware how lucky we are to have that extra help, because I think without her, I probably wouldn't be able to carry on working during this time.
Sure, it's a challenge. If I could, I'd like to just share the screen with everybody to see your husband Ben, just to make sure they can put a face to the name. 1 second, let me see if I can do this. Here we go. You will recognize Benjamin from our community. How did you guys meet?
That's both of us looking way, way younger. 2008, obviously at our wedding.
These are your gorgeous kids. Introduce us to your lovely children.
So this is Grace. She's going to be 4 in June. And I don't want to break it to her yet that she may not be having a birthday party. She's been planning it for the past 6 months. And Mikhail, who's going to be 9 in July.
Fantastic.
So I think also, again, the big gap between them, sort of 5 years, also helps a lot.
And tell me, how did you and Ben meet?
So we actually met at a sukkah party like 16 years ago. And, I was living in London at the time. It was very popular for, young South Africans to come over. And he was here from France. And, we met at the sukkah party. That was before apps and online. And you actually had to go out and...
Well, I just want to use this as an amazing marketing opportunity to tell all the young professionals watching this, you want to meet your Jewish partners, come to our Sukkot parties, come to our synagogue events, and you never know who you'll meet.
Absolutely. It was very much that. And I think not only was a Sukkot party where we first met, but I think probably a Purim party that sort of solidified the relationship. And I think, the community and being part of a community has continued to kind of feature in our couple and then by extension our family sort of over the years.
Now tell me something. Professionally, I know you're a therapist, right? Could you tell us a little bit about what you do and particularly how you've adapted that during COVID-19?
So I'm a psychologist. I'm currently working in private practice. I actually was fortunate enough that I was able to train in the States at Columbia University in New York, because Benjamin and I were there for 10 years. And that was just an amazing opportunity and amazing training. When I came here to London, I think I decided to go the kind of private practice route because it just felt more conducive to balancing that with sort of family as opposed to working more in a hospital setting. But I think what I like to say colloquially is that really I'm helping people a lot with, what's difficult for them. And, and certainly sometimes it can manifest in more sort of severe anxiety or depression. But for the most part, I think I have worked with clients who are struggling with their relationships, struggling in their careers, struggling maybe with family dynamics, and kind of working through that and giving them the space to talk through it, and in doing so kind of see their way clear to handling things differently.
And I think also, mental health is so important, and it's such an important topic both for counselors, therapists, for rabbis, for communities to address. Mental health has become something much more in the public eye in recent years, and I know specifically during COVID-19 as a rabbi, we've seen severe stress on families, domestic violence issues, relationships, strain on finances, and every type of strain. This has brought so much to a head for people. And it's so important to take care of yourself. You know, we have now in the United Synagogue our annual Mental Health Awareness Shabbat, where we try and engage with this topic and let people know that there is real help out there. This is a real issue. And from a Jewish perspective, over thousands of years, our sages have taught us that these type of anxieties and problems are real. And even in halakha, that there is very much a way for us to address them and to help people. So having people like yourself doing this work is so valuable and so important. So thank you so much.
No, I think it is really important. And I think, again, I like your point about sort of the culture shifting, because having trained in New York, where it is such a cliche, you know, everyone has their therapist, it's very much normalized. And I think that's sort of the point. It's just got to be something that one can do. I mean, I have one client who says, yeah, I just kind of pull that into like my rent, if you will. It's just a non-negotiable. And I think the other misconception sometimes people have is that they have to be in like acute distress. You know, they have to be kind of, you know, suicidal or like acute, you know, having panic attacks. And actually, I think it can just be a helpful forum and a space just to work through any difficult time that we're having.
I think one really challenging thing we've seen as rabbis and rebbitzins is supporting families through bereavement. I know for us, you know, when somebody passes away, it's the most terribly troubling time for the next of kin and for the families. And as a rabbi of the community, one of the things that myself, I'm Binstock and Rabbi Menzel, we want to do is we want to be there. We want to be able to be there to give the family the support, literally being in that home with them. We're normally the first people who we get the call. And the challenge of doing that long distance or virtually, or doing Zoom shivers and Zoom funerals and levayas, it's very painful and it's very, very hard. And I'm sure you can imagine this affects not only the immediate family, but also the wider community who may have really loved that person. And I want to ask you, with permission, to share with us, I guess, your personal story, because we all know that you unfortunately lost your father before COVID-19.
Yes.
But it's a very important story. If you wouldn't mind sharing with us what happened.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that I can very much attest to the fact that, you know, you guys do rush the community and the rabbis do rush in to support from a distance. And it is actually quite ironic, because I had an experience with losing my father just before Rosh Hashanah last year that it had... I'm
showing everybody a picture of your father. This is Bernard Schneider of blessed memory, who was Bonnie's father, who passed away last September.
That I think it had some of the elements in that, you know, he had been unwell, he was admitted to hospital. It turned out he had a duodenal ulcer. There was great rejoicing because it was very treatable and we were kind of assured he would be fine. But actually overnight, he took a turn for the worst. And literally sort of overnight, landed up in ICU. Very, very tragically, actually, the hospital did not contact my mother or my brother. So I think there was also that element of not being able to see him. I think they both managed to get there sort of just in time the following morning. But I think for me, what was hardest about that was not having that opportunity to be there with him and have that last conversation. And so, you know, when I'm hearing about all these tragic losses and situations, time and time again, you hear people kind of lamenting the fact that they couldn't be there. And I think it is a complicating factor. I think the other thing is the other point that you make about how do you kind of mourn if you're not within the community, if you can't go through this in the traditional way. I think I was very fortunate because although I wasn't with the sort of St. John's Wood Saatchi community, I was back in the community that I grew up in, with our rabbi there who sort of married us, and, you know, there was that connection. But I think what I then did when I came back was I did a kind of shiur in my dad's memory and a memorial at a later date. And so I think one of the things is that we're going to have to be really creative.
Sure. I mean, you know, for me, my father died 18 months ago. I don't want to make this conversation too morbid, but it's almost a blessing that I had that opportunity when he did pass away to be with him and to be with the family and to have that experience of Shiva and Kaddish and all the rituals that go along with bereavement. And I know for you as well, you had your family, you had your community, you went straight back to South Africa. When you came back to London, Rabbi Menzel and Rabbi Chai organized beautiful memorial evening in your home. It was a very special occasion. I was there. But for people right now who are going through bereavement, and unfortunately, across the Jewish community in the United Kingdom, there are dozens and dozens of families who may be watching this and who are suffering bereavement. From a therapeutic, psychological perspective, do you have any words of encouragement or suggestions or tips to kind of give them some hope during this really challenging time?
I think three things spring to mind. I mean, the first is it's going to be a process, and it's a little bit like, you know, you going on a bear hunt. You can't go over it. You can't go under it. You can't go around it. You kind of got to go through it. And I think it is just sort of also surrendering to the fact and accepting the fact that it will be all the more complicated because of the dynamics around it, of not then being able to do all the traditions that are so comforting, and have contact with each other, even as a nuclear family. I think the second thing is to think of ways then, because it can't be in that more traditional way, what can be done, even if it means that it might only be in a few months' time that a memorial can be done, or maybe it's on the anniversary of the person's passing. So at least to kind of take some comfort in, even if it can't be that Shiva week with everyone there can still be that event with everyone there. And I think the other thing is just to, I think what's really hard about grief is, and I, you know, somebody else shared this with me, but it kind of comes in waves, and it will just sometimes just spring up. And obviously in the immediate aftermath and in the sort of more acute mourning phase, it comes in very frequent acute waves. But even, you know, years later, you can still hear that song, see that photograph, have a life experience oneself where that person's particularly missed, and it can kind of resurge. And again, that's also a place where I think kind of mental health and therapy can be really, really helpful.
Sure. I want to change the conversation a little bit, because I know, Bonnie, when we did our community Shabbaton last year, you had an incredible story to tell. And I think our listeners would be so grateful to hear that story. If you could share with us briefly that story, we would be so grateful.
Well, I'm always happy to share my story. I guess it was a particularly challenging time for me. I think it's funny because being in this time of COVID, and it's made me sort of reflect. At the moment, I'm actually feeling very grateful. I feel like I have a lot of things to be grateful about, because we're well, thank God, and people close to us are well, and we're working, and, you know, we have help. And I've actually found myself having these moments of guilt where I'm like, but I'm okay, and the whole world is imploding and everyone's suffering. And I've actually had to say, well, there's probably been other times in my life where my world has literally been imploding and it seemed like the rest of the world is sort of carrying on as per normal. And that's what's so difficult about life, is you just kind of never know what's really coming your way. And I think 2013 represented a time that was, you know, really, really challenging. I just finished, you know, my PhD. I think Mikhail was just about 2, and I was diagnosed with an acoustic neuroma, which is a rare and benign neuroma tumor on the hearing nerve, hence acoustic. And on the one hand, it was outside the brain, it was non-cancerous, but because your hearing nerve does originate near your brain, it was compressing the brain stem. So I needed a neurosurgery, you know, very extensive. And also your facial nerve runs parallel with your hearing nerve. So it was quite interesting, because the surgeons were saying, well, you're incredibly lucky because this is outside your brain and it's non-cancerous, but there is a real risk to your facial nerve, and you could sustain a palsy. It was a very stressful time, incredibly stressful time in the lead up to it, because I became so concerned and fearful that I would have a palsy and have this outcome, which is in fact what happened. And it kind of resulted in a good 2-3 year period that was really difficult, which involved kind of some more surgeries to you know, sort of reanimate my face to a degree, but also just coming to terms with a very real change in my appearance, and meant that I look different to other people, and sort of reclaiming my confidence, both in terms of social situations, but also working again. So I think it was a real journey. And I think the two things that I kind of took from that was, things are just a process, because there wasn't one day that I woke up and I was like, I feel better now, this is okay. It was just very, very glacial, very slow. And again, kind of in that thing that like waves can come back on us, you know, there might still be a day where I kind of find myself thinking about it and focusing on it, and then we're sort of back on track again. But I think just trusting sometimes that things are a process, and the pain just takes as long as the pain takes. And I think the other thing that again sort of came out for me from that was the importance of holding the duality of our experience. So on the one hand, sure, I was super grateful that it wasn't cancer and it was outside the brain. I mean, this was amazing. It could have been so much worse. And on the other, and I guess I could have gone quite Tony Robbins about it and been very, very, you know, evangelical about, you know, just always being positive. But at the same time, I was sort of 33. It was major. And that was really difficult and devastating. And I kind of had to sort of hold both experiences, because if I'd gotten stuck in how awful it was, I wouldn't have left my bed. You know, I think if I had gotten stuck in, oh, it's all fine, I don't think I really would have honored the part that wasn't fine. And I think so often we have these experiences that seem, we have the same, you know, we have different experiences at the same time, and they seem in conflict, and we feel like we need to choose between one or the other. And really it's about kind of just incorporating the both of them, which is, I think, what we're doing right now in the midst of all of this.
Sure. I mean, you know, hearing this story is so inspiring, to see the way in which you have built a beautiful family and you continue to be a very positive person despite having had a very difficult experience, and it changed your appearance hugely. Reminds me of my experience when I took Camp Simcha. I used to be a counselor on Camp Simcha, which was for a camp for children with cancer. I took it for 7 or 8 summers. And one summer we had a boy in the camp who stood up at the age of 16 to give a Devar Torah, to give a Torah idea at Shabbat lunch. And he described how at the age of 15, due to a tumor, he'd lost his hearing. Until the age of 15, he'd been a totally healthy, regular teenager. And then the age of 15, he loses his hearing. A year later, the tumor comes back, and following further surgery, he loses his eyesight. Wow. And he's now aged 16 and a half, and he can no longer hear or see. And he stands up to say a Devar Torah, to say an idea where he can't see or hear. He communicates by Morse through his carer touching his fingers. And he described the mitzvah in the Torah, do not be jealous. Yeah. And he said, how can God command me not to be jealous of anybody else? I can't see and I can't hear. And I know what I'm missing, because until a year ago I could do both. And he described this idea that has stuck with me, and you just reminded me of it. He said, the Almighty gives every single human being in this world a different test. Everyone has their peckle. And no one knows what the other person's peckle is. Sometimes you see somebody else's life and you think it's all rosy and it's all fantastic and it's all amazing, but no one knows what's going on behind the scenes. But you sharing this story with our community, what you've been through, and your resilience, it gives us such positivity and such hope. It's incredible. It really is.
But also, I really love, that's an amazing story. And I think what also to be taken from that in terms of the jealousy, we also don't know what is coming. And so I think we have to have a degree of humility. Like when things are going well, yes, there's gratitude. Yes, we're happy and we're fortunate and it's wonderful, but you just kind of cherish that, and you don't just take it for granted in a way and assume that that's how it's always going to be. I think there's a kind of humility that one can take. But the other thing I wanted to say about, you know, the community really, it was a huge part of my getting back on track, because actually we moved only a year after this had happened back to London. And it was a really, really difficult time still. And I was going back to New York for more surgeries. And we weren't even living in this area. We were living in central London. And I kind of met no one, and I was very isolated. And Benjamin said, you know, this is ridiculous. We need to get back in connection with the community. And that prompted our initial move to St. John's Wood and joining Saatchi. And he was the one who was coming. And he'd kind of come and he'd say, oh, you know, you should come. People asked about you. And I would say, no, and not coming. And eventually, like tentatively, I was sort of dragged along once, twice. And because everybody was so welcoming, and I didn't, you know, I very quickly began to not feel self-conscious. That was just a huge platform and a huge stepping point. And then from there, the friendships developed, and from there, the confidence came, and from the confidence, the ability to work came again. So I do credit the community with playing a huge part in me getting back on track, you know, even before you guys really knew me. So it's a testimony to that.
It's incredible. And, you know, I can't wait to be back in shul. And you talk about taking things for granted. This period has taught all of us never to take any of the blessings in life for granted. Just the ability to see family, the ability to go to shul, to daven with your community and to engage with everyone, to even have a wedding, even have a funeral. You know, how crazy that sounds, that in itself is a blessing. It's a bizarre thing to say, but it's a reality. And it has been a blessing to have this interview with you. I thank you so much. Thank you for sharing with us a very personal story. I wish you and Benjamin continued good health, and we can't wait to see you and the kids very, very soon. Bonnie, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Take care.
All the best.
Bye-bye.